Be here to show you how to create bubbles. Bubbles like you blow from a little bubble wand, put some soap in a dish and kind of get that iridescent look of a bubble. So what we're going to do is I've got my image here, and it's always good to work on an image because these bubbles are going to be very subtle, and you want to see this up against an image. Working on just a solid color doesn't give you kind of the feel of how this would work. So I'm going to go to my layers panel and create a new layer. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a selection using my elliptical marquee tool, drawing a perfect circle. And then with this, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to simply fill this with white for now, which I'm going to use Option Delete. Okay, so we just have this white circle right here. And from this, I'm going to add a new layer up above this, and I'm going to clip it to the layer down below using the Option or Alt key to clip this layer here. I'm going to grab my gradient tool, which is G, and I'm going to go up to my gradient drop-down menu, and I'm going to choose kind of this rainbow colored gradient. And we can do a linear gradient or a radial. I'm just going to do a linear gradient. And on this layer up above, I'm simply going to pull across my bubble like so. And it's going to create this kind of bar, but it's only going to show up in my bubble. With this layer, I'm going to go into the filter menu and choose Liquify. And this Liquify, this is where you can use the fun Liquify stuff like the pucker and bloat and twirl. I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to use the twirl right here. And right bracket is going to make my brush larger, and I'm just going to kind of twirl this a little bit and kind of mess with it. Then I can go to my bloat feature as well, get a larger brush using the right bracket, and just kind of have a little bit of fun with this, and kind of make this grow and kind of create this iridescent, shimmery look on this bubble, which is what soap's going to do. It's just the reflection and the refraction of all the different bandwidths of light. So click OK. Now, I can take my layer here with a move tool and I can kind of position this in here, and I can also scale this down using my Command T for transform and kind of get that in there where I'd like to have that shape. Now this is going to be extremely subtle, so because I'm going to take this and I'm going to knock the opacity way, 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 way down. Okay, so we get just that little bit of look and feel. Okay, now on top of this layer here, we're going to call this my gradient layer here. On top of this layer, I'm going to create a new layer again and also clip it to it using the Option click in between. I'm going to grab my brush and I'm going to come over here to my default colors, and with a large soft brush on this layer, I'm just going to throw in a little bit of shadow here. I'm going to set that layer to multiply, and I'm going to take that way, way, way back. Okay, create a new layer above that, and this is going to be my highlight layer, and I'm going to choose white as my color, and I'm just going to paint in some white on the top here as well. I'm going to set that to screen and don't have to scale that back much. Shadow layer, definitely want to scale back a little bit more. I'm going to add another layer on top of this too in here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with my brush here, and I'm going to reduce the size of the brush. And I may just come in with a few kind of stripes across here, and these are just kind of going to be reflections of whatever it may be around the area here. So I may do something like this. With these, I'm going to go into my filter menu and I'm going to choose a Gaussian blur, and I'm going to blur these lines out because I don't want them to be distinct by any means. I want them to be just kind of specular highlights here on the bubble as well. Again, all clipped to this original layers. So these are my highlights. This is my shadow. And these are just kind of my line reflections here. Okay, now you don't see them very much, but they actually do make a difference. Another layer up here, and this one doesn't need to be clipped. What I want to do with this is I want to create just kind of some reflections on here. And I could do that maybe by using a brush and using maybe a harder brush, not completely hard, but I could go in, say, at like 50% hardness. And you may just go in and add some dots of different sizes here just to kind of create, little reflections on there from lights or, a little bit of refraction coming off there. And then I'm also going to create another layer here. I'm going to grab my pen tool, and I may go in here and I'm just going to create some quick little shapes. Here, light reflection, whatever, could be a light source. And so there's my path right there. And in order to turn this path into a selection, I'm going to use my command return or control return, turns that into selection. So then I'm going to fill that with my white. So that's going to be Option or Alt Delete. And I'm going to click Command or Control D for deselect. And I can apply a slight blur to that as well, using my blur, Gaussian blur, and blurring that out. I want that to be a little bit more noticeable because that adds just a kind of a little bit of character to it as well. And you can also do darker ones too if you want to have something that's going to be kind of a dark reflection coming off here. What I'm then going to do is I'm going to select all those layers that I just created, and I'm going to right-click on them, and I'm going to turn this into a smart object. Okay? And with this smart object, I'm now going to go under my effects panel, and I'm going to do an inner glow inside my sphere. And the inner glow I'm going to set to black, and I'm going to kind of bump up the opacity here. And this is kind of going to create some depth around the entire thing. Now, it doesn't need to be super dark because once we set this to a blending mode, it's just going to add a little bit of character to it. So I've got my blending mode of multiply. It's set to black here, opacity around 10-15%. And then the choke is going to kind of give it an edge to it, so I don't want any choke, but I want the size to be maxed out at 250. The contour, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to set to more rounded. Instead of the angular edge right here, I'm going to set it to more rounded, and that's going to give me kind of my more rounded look and feel of this globe right here, which is kind of cool, okay? And now what I want to do is I'm going to take this entire thing and I'm going to set this to be a soft light. And you see we have just this little shadow around here, so I'm probably going to go back to this inner glow, and I'm probably going to cut down the amount of inner glow here just enough so we can see a hint of it. Now you can see that it seems like we lose all of the attributes of this. Well, I'm going to do a Command J, and I'm going to copy this whole thing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this copied layer to multiply, and I'm going to take my inner glow that I have here on this one, and I'm going to reduce that opacity a little bit more on that right there. Now, so what we have now is we have our inner glow here on this, and in fact, that inner glow I think I'm going to take off completely here, so I just get my multiply effect here, and I think I'm going to add this inner glow, but I'm just going to knock this back here substantially on this one. So now, from this, I'm going to select both of these, and I'm going to right-click on this, and I'm going to convert this to a smart object, okay? And you'll see when I do this, then I can go back in with my blending mode of multiply, and now I've got my two smart objects inside here. Now I can take my Command or Control T for transform, and I can set this down, and this is going to create really cool bubbles. And then you can set the opacity of these to go around to get that look and feel of those bubbles that are going to look great on a transparent background or a background on something else. Now, if you don't like the intensity of those colors, these are all smart objects. You can go back into your smart object here and open it up, and there's your entire thing, this set to multiply, this set to soft light. You can see if the soft light is the one that's creating too much impact, I can take that soft light back. I can click on my multiply one, and I can take that, and I can adjust that back, save the whole thing, hit close, come back in here, and remember that I can adjust the overall opacity here if I want to do something like this. Now, if you wanted to add a few more layers of highlights to this smart object, you certainly could, but now we've got this kind of ethereal look of this going anywhere that you want to over your objects. And again, if you want to make this look different, you can always go back in and throw a new layer on here, Option or Alt click to get that mask, and then go in and paint with white on this layer if you wanted to kind of blend that out a little bit more, get a little bit more of a highlight on there, and do whatever you want. Cool stuff, but that's a really quick way that you can kind of create these interesting bubble looks.